Wow, what a great way to kick off our conference. Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to our conference, the CFO Masterclass. My name is Kristen Todd. I'm the Vice President of Marketing with the CFOLC, and I echo what Jack's earlier sentiment. Thanks so much for joining us. Although I do miss the ability to shake your hand today, I am so glad we can connect in this unique way. This is our 10th annual conference and our 15th season. As our team prepared, we reflected on these milestones and shared some great stories. And here's one of my all-time favorites, where a perfect blend of learning and connecting got its start. In 2006, Jack McCullough founded the company and began hosting free programs as a hobby right on the MIT campus in Cambridge, Mass. Of course, they gained in popularity. At one of those early programs, Jack put a coffee can out for volunteer donations, just to cover the cost of the name tags. Well, at the end of the program, they discovered that the coffee can was stolen. We still laugh about that one today. Of course, there are many, many more stories. Ask me sometime, or better yet, tell me a few of your own. Let's connect soon. Now on to the next session, Mastering Successful Business Transformation. This next panel features a few exceptional masters: Ted Miles, Mary Jeffs, Ken Stillwell, Bona Allen, and moderator Yash Madhusudan, co-founder and CEO of File. It's my distinct pleasure to tell you a bit more about this panel's moderator. Yash started File along with his co-founder in 2016 with the goal of building a new standard for expense management that is fit for this generation. He has an extensive background in customer user experience and has excelled in both enterprise and solution sales, working for global MNCs and early to mid-stage venture-backed startups across the world. Make sure to ask questions of each panelist, put them in the chat area, and note which speaker that it's directed to. A special thanks to File for being a long-standing CFOLC partner and a gold sponsor for this conference. Yash, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you, CFOLC, for putting together this amazing panel of CFOs. Again, my name is Yash, and I'm the founder and CEO of File. It's my privilege to be moderating the session, sitting alongside some amazing CFOs. We've seen that the role of finance has sort of transformed over the last 60 years or so, and today CFOs are seen as strategic enablers, driving strategy, managing change, and driving transformation. In virtually every public company, we look at, the CFO is right next to the CEO, articulating a story about financial results the company expects to realize. The knowledge, expertise are increasingly sought after every department and across every business function. Right? Simply put, CFOs today are, the role is increasingly becoming fast-paced, far-reaching, and much broader in terms of impact across the whole organization. If there's anything that we've learned in this year, it is that it is to be prepared for the unexpected, right? The amount of change that we've seen, the amount of disruption that we've seen, I think we could all, also use some peace and quiet, for the next few, sort of years, both in our personal lives as well as in business. But we all know, that's not going to happen, right? Since change is the only constant and the rate of change is, increasing over and over, what better topic, than to talk about, transformation, right? Over the next 45 minutes, I will do my best at engaging this amazing panel on topics ranging from steering transformation, on leadership, managing expectations across the board. We will also learn how CFOs have successfully positioned themselves to fulfill the transformation CFO roles and understand the personal developmental path that CFOs can apply to become an effective transformation leader. Right. On that note, to kick things off, let me start by asking, our panelists to share a little bit about their business. What unique challenges has this year presented to them, and how it has influenced their role as CFO. Ken, would you like to, start?
Sure, Yash, thanks. So maybe our challenge, I think our biggest challenge, which is probably not unique with a lot of the companies that are out there, is moving from a company that had 60 to 70% of our employees in the office every single day to a company, and we have we have approximately, or we're approaching 6,000 employees across the world. About, let's call it 30% of those are field facing, so they were already working remote. So you end up with the other 60 to 70%. And we, I think yesterday we maybe had 60 people in offices across the world. So, I mean, that's a very big cultural change. And I will tell you that, March 9th, whenever it was that we first decided to go remote, I was quite nervous about our ability to function as a company. All these thoughts go through your head like, well, will people still work hard? Will they be committed? Will they feel connected to the company? Will they be effective in being mentored and actually executing the work that they need done? And I can speak for our employees, but I'm sure there are many other companies that feel the same way. Our employees really stepped up, and in a way that I didn't expect them to. And I just think that we as a society have really shown how agile we can be when thrown, a curveball, so to speak, in terms of what happened. So I think that was our biggest challenge. Our biggest challenge was just trying to get people to stay on the mission of supporting our clients and continuing to accelerate the growth in the business. And we're going through transformations as a company, and just trying to keep people engaged with all the other distractions and abnormalities that they had going on in their lives at this time.
That's great to hear, Ken. Mary, would you like to go ahead next and share a little bit more about Salsify and how the last 10 months have been in terms of navigating change?
Sure. So just to orient everyone on Salsify, what Salsify is, we're about a 400-person company located in Boston. And what we do is we are in the commerce experience management space. So we work with brand manufacturers and basically help them to get all of their content in a place so they can deliver it and deliver an experience to customers wherever the customer wants to buy. So while this year has certainly, we've faced a lot of the same challenges that Ken just alluded to, we've also had significant changes just dealing with our customers who, while they were on that journey of digital transformation, COVID has really accelerated that journey for our customers. And so having to keep up with them, and what we thought was going to take several years for companies to go through this transformation process, we're seeing a lot of it happen in a period of months. So we've had our own internal transformation and just challenges of growing and the impact that COVID has had on our company and our employees, but certainly as well as that, we've seen it pretty dramatically in a positive way for our business with what our customers are going through.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mary. Bona, I think you're in an industry that has as you mentioned, has seen an interesting change in terms of how COVID has impacted your business. But would love to hear a little bit more about the unique challenges, and how your role has sort of come to the center in terms of managing that change.
Sure. Well, thank you. Glad to be here. Kazuma Building and Design Group, we are construction. So we build primarily big manufacturing facilities. We design those facilities as well. So we have architects and engineers on staff. Then we also build big warehouse distribution facilities like e-commerce. So a lot of e-commerce businesses are using our facilities for distribution. And those are becoming more and more prevalent, and it's been good for us. In the Northeast, in New York and New Jersey, Pennsylvania, tri-state area, we do a lot of interiors. So, I mean, we shut everything down when the COVID first hit. So part of the challenge was keeping these jobs going, and the big manufacturing, big warehouse distribution, that wasn't as much of an issue. But overall, I mean, as I think I've mentioned before in different venues, I mean, one of our core values, and I keep these on my desk here, it's a core value list, is safety. So regardless of what's going on in the society and the virus or not, or epidemic or not, we're always focused on safety. So job sites are used to worrying about safety and changing as things change. In the Northeast, we shut everything down, but we were able to keep everyone employed. We didn't have to furlough anybody, but then we have to keep them engaged. right? So and here in Atlanta at our US headquarters, keeping all the staff engaged was a big deal. But we've been able to use technology to do that. And I check in with all my core group staff, and then company-wide, we check in a lot too. So I think the big challenge is figuring out how to keep our jobs going, because demand is increased in certain aspects of our business, while at the same time keeping everyone engaged. And as you guys have already said, keeping the folks from a career standpoint moving forward and career enhancement too.
Absolutely. And managing this at a small company is hard enough, and managing at that scale is obviously extremely challenging. Ted, would love to hear your comments on how the last 10 months have sort of reprioritized things, or brought on new challenges that your company faces.
Sure. Happy to. Sorry, I had an internet hiccup for a second there. You guys hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, great. So yeah, Ted Miles, I'm CFO and head of business operations at a company called Scholar Rock. Scholar Rock is a Kendall Square biotech company, truly clinical stage, focused on really treating serious diseases where signaling protein factors is a fundamental element of the underlying disease. Our lead program is in spinal muscular atrophy, which is a pretty terrible genetic disease. Affects younger people, and really, in some cases, very young people, like infants and babies. So when COVID hit, first area of attention and focus was what's happening to our clinical sites and the families that are in our clinical sites. We had a very active clinical site we currently have an ongoing program where globally patients are coming in, getting treated, getting assessed on a regular basis throughout the 1-year period of our study. We had a really active clinical site in Italy, and COVID hit Italy pretty hard. The brakes went on everything. We were really concerned about those patients and the safety and how we could continue the trial, because we think the medicine could be really important and impactful. Turns out the sites, obviously hospitals and clinical trial sites, are focused on safety. They were able to kind of manage through it. The other element in our business is our employees. We have 120 employees, about 70 are lab-based. So unlike the CFO and others like us, we can work remotely and probably be 90% effective. People running experiments in the lab have to get in the lab. So the company had to really pivot the way it thinks and manages workflow, keep the preclinical experiments happening, keep people in the lab and doing so safely. So company pivoted pretty quickly on that. We run shifts. People are able to get in for the time. We do a lot of testing and just enhanced a lot of protocols to make sure that the workflow in the lab occurred. Happy punchline is that the clinical study did continue. The patients did continue to get treated. And we recently, a couple of weeks ago, released interim data that suggested that the drug could really be working. We achieved proof of concept. So really thrilled about that.
Great to hear that. So as one of the things that astounds me, about this panel is there's a century of CFO experience, right? Just on the stage, if I can say so. And during
most
your
of that
roles,
is weekend, of course. Most of that
right. And each of you in your current early roles have been involved and in many cases led transformational projects. I would love to hear, I think the panel would, the audience would also love to hear, how the role of the CFO has sort of evolved, changed, and why do you think it is important for, CFOs to sort of be part of that, transformation initiative? Mary, would you like to, go first at this?
Sure. I mean, certainly, I think for many years now, the role of the CFO has evolved to be, less and less of just solely a financial leader and more about a business leader. And so I think that, especially when you're going through transformational change and whether that's, change that you're doing internally in your own company or change that is sort of thrown upon you with something like COVID requiring it, to have a perspective and be immersed fully in the business as a leader, as opposed to just, a functional leader, and truly being that business partner for the CEO, being very visible in the company is really, we're in this unique position as CFO to have broad cross-functional reach. And so taking advantage of that and our leadership skills to help shepherd companies through change, whether it's, like I said, good change, lots of growth, or change that can be much more challenging to manage through, whether it's reductions or something like COVID. So I think the transformation was already well underway, but I think something, times like this should even reinforce the importance of that even more.
Right. And, I think in our earlier call, you mentioned something that I still remember about being close to the business, about, how we were part of, let's say, sales calls or business calls. I think, it's an amazing, it'll be great to sort of hear any personal sort of story that you think, would help understanding, how to bridge that gap between, let's say, business and,
Yeah, so from my perspective, I mean, in order to be that really a business leader that I was talking about, it requires deep understanding of the business, and in a lot of cases, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, right? So, spending time significant time with the sales team. A lot of us as CFOs do that, right? A lot of financial leaders do that, not really understanding the pipeline and deal flow and those types of things. But going beyond that and really understanding marketing and top of funnel and what's going to drive the business forward in that respect, what the product needs are for the company, getting close to customers and understanding the problems that you're trying to help your customers solve, and how those can relate to adoption problems or customer success problems. So I think it really is, it's on us to have our reach be very broad in the organization, and it's only going to help us be more effective in our jobs, more effective in telling the story, whether that's to investors or ultimately to the street. So I think that being immersed in all parts of the business is just going to make for a really well-rounded leader.
Thanks, Mary. Ted, I mean, you've been on both sides. You've been on the investor side. Now you are, CFO at a biotech, sort of company. How would you sort of, share your journey in terms of, dealing with transformation across your entire sort of career path so far?
Yeah, I mean, look, the biotech industry is very fluid. I think a company has to be really poised for change at all times. As Mary touched on, there are sometimes significant reductions, or sometimes there's hyper growth, like in the tech industry. So, I've spent time as a CFO, I spent time as a COO as well, and really spanning across the business. Certainly enjoyed my time going with sales reps when I was in a commercial stage company, going out with sales reps and on sales calls and hearing from physicians and how they're treating their patients with our therapy. It's really important to get that broad enterprise view in everything you're doing. And then look, the quantitative skills, the analytical skills just become sort of extra added, hamburger helper for your leadership as you're leading the company through things, rather than leading with the analytical. You start with leadership and then the analytical helps. Yeah, really important to understand the entire business. With the change management, starting from the top, thinking about where you want to go and understanding the industry, where you want to fit into the industry, and then trickling that down throughout the organization is really, really critical.
Right. Ken, you're an industry that also works with customers in driving some of these, transformation, across the board, right? It'd be great for, you to sort of talk about some of the complexities, challenges that you face, not just at your current, role, but also in the past, that you think you could, share with the audience.
Sure. So, so I've been a CFO in enterprise software for a lot of years, probably more than I want to acknowledge. But the one thing that is common, and the one thing that I've learned, is that every company is trying to figure out what they can do to deliver their solution to more clients, right? To be able to grow, to be able to have more value, to have the ability to cross and upsell, have higher retention rates. The importance of growth wasn't something that just popped up in the last 5 years. Growth has always been key to creating value. So if you start there and you think about clients, first and foremost, wanting to create growth, be able to get their brand, their company to have more reach in terms of the number of clients and the importance of what they do, Then you kind of, as a CFO, you have to kind of step into that. So what do I need to know about how to enable the company that I work for and also the companies that we're helping, right, to be able to accelerate that? So, it was touched on a little bit earlier. I think Mary mentioned about, really that kind of being maybe a very cross-functionally literate. I think it's important to spend time with each of the functions to really understand what does a day in the life of a CMO who's trying to grow, what are the decisions they make? How do they think about digital channels versus ads versus programs versus events? How does sales operations think about the sales management cadence and how they build sales pods and the best way to get an effective distribution, using partners, not using partners? How does a product team make trade-off decisions, right, in software or in manufacturing? How do you understand product market fit? How do you understand these are areas of the business that a lot of CFOs that are maybe newer don't obviously gravitate toward. They're trying to really get the CFO, the traditional CFO role, anchored. But as you kind of get further in your career, you kind of get more comfortable. You can do that more. Maybe it's more reflexive of being the traditional CFO. You have to get outbound and you have to understand things. I think it's paramount for a CFO to be the person that understands the operations of the business better than anybody else. And if you're expecting your CEO to do that, that's unfair, because the CEO has to drive strategy, drive culture, drive engagement with clients. And I think it's important for us to try to play that role so that we can be an advisor to our peers. And I think that if you do that well and you do it in a collaborative way, you can actually be an enabler of growth, which is almost like unheard of in the job description of the CFO to be a growth enabler. But that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to look around corners, build the scale in the business so that all of the other peers of ours can really excel. And I think it's important for us to think about our roles like that, not a number cruncher, a compliance person, a guardrail, that's not at all like that. And some of those things need to be done, but that's not the real value play for our role.
I totally agree. I think in a clinical stage biotech, the revenue, if you will, is not revenue, it's clinical data and moving preclinical assets into the clinic. That's where the investors get their return ultimately, because it's a pathway to eventually having a drug. But what can we do to empower, as we're going through the budget process? It's not about holding on to the pennies, it's putting them in the right place. As we're scaling up and looking at kind of graduating from a phase 2 company to a phase 3 company, the clinical trial costs triple. And we want to, many more sites, many more patients. How do we get patients through it faster? Which actually means accelerating cost. We really got to spend a lot of time. I think, look, a part of the CFO's office should be FP&A. I think you cannot have too good of an FP&A person or people or team, depending how big your company is. But to the extent you can attach good FP&A folks to the business and different components of the business, that only serves to help enable them and enable the clinical trial folks, the manufacturing supply chain folks to make better decisions. It also helps feedback information to you as well, so you can help support the enterprise.
Yeah, I agree with all that.
So just one additional point I wanted to, and then I'll defer to you, Bono. I think if you don't think about your role as a CFO as being a candidate, just a candidate to be the CEO, you're thinking about your role incorrectly. It doesn't mean you will be, it doesn't mean that that's the natural path, but you have to at least think about that being an option, and that will change your complete perspective around what your role is. You'll care about other things than just the traditional roles. And many of us are not comfortable as CFOs thinking that way, but you should push yourself. It doesn't, like I said, doesn't mean it's obvious. It doesn't mean that it'll even happen ever in your career, but just think about it being an option, and it'll change your perspective, I think.
That's right. I think we're all talking about developing relationships across functional lines and at the highest level, but also at the lowest levels. And so ultimately trying to be a liaison between all these different groups, because we do have visibility into details within all those groups, within the businesses. And so for us, I mean, construction, I can't send an accountant out to the field to run equipment, but what we can do is figure out how in the COO and I work closely together here is how can our groups work together to make the whole company more efficient? So get the accountants out of that box and help them think through what the on-site people are going through and how can we make their lives easier. And so it's sort of the mindset, Ken, that you were talking about is leading from the top and bringing everyone together as one company instead of all these different divisions. That's the biggest challenge, regardless of what's going on in society and everything else, right? And also, it means we have to be people. I have to be a people person to get out and talk to these people. And that can be a challenge for some folks. It has been for me in the past.
Right. Very well put, Varna. So one of, someone actually put this question for me before, and I'm just going to share, ask this to all of you. When an external event like sort of COVID happens, it is inevitable for change to happen, right? Everyone has to change, right? But when there is business as usual, driving change is a lot more difficult because it involves bringing people together, selling, and making sure that there is, need for driving that change, right? So what are some of the challenges that you face during that time, right? When you feel like, there's no external agent that's actually pushing us to change, but we have to drive change, instance of, challenges overcome with respect to people facing resistance and so on. So would love to sort of, hear your thoughts on, on this.
Competition. I mean, in technology, bringing in more efficient ways to do things, because if your competition isn't already, then they will be soon. So technology can be a big change too. I mean, construction on the job sites and in design, we were pretty far ahead and try to stay ahead of the curve and using the best technology and the digital technology and that sort of thing for safety and to design and build projects. But on the back end, back of house, the technology is way behind, and it's sort of a mindset change that, well, we don't need all those fancy gadgets to understand where we are from a cost standpoint or where we're going from a company standpoint. But without those, or with those, we can be more efficient because our competition is going that direction anyway.
Yash, one thing that I would say is, even we're obviously growing very quickly. So one thing we can count on is a lot of change, but even in the absence of that, I think that one thing we all strive for is how do we improve operational efficiency, even in periods where there may not be rapid growth or change. And one of the things that Ted and I talked about this before as well, but one of the things that we did here was we centralized a business operations function that sits under me. And it was really about combining some of those operational resources, think of like sales op, marketing ops, product ops that are sitting in the functional groups, and combining that under one umbrella. So there's a couple of different roles within the business operations group. There's a strategy component. We also have a data engineering component because we get so much data out of our product related to our customers that we can leverage to help our marketing team and our sales team. There's a internal system, so our critical systems, think things like Salesforce and our HRIS systems and our accounting and FP&A systems that are managed centrally, and anything that integrates into those systems is also managed out of through that business operations team. And then there's also an analysis group. So making sure that everyone's looking at the same data, that we don't have this situation where the business has one set of data and finance has another set of data. And it's really about centralizing that so that we can improve that operational efficiency, so that we can knock down some of those barriers, so that when there is something like COVID that happens, we have some key things in place to be able to drive change through the organization where it might otherwise be harder if it was more decentralized.
So I don't know exactly when I learned this, but I did not come up with this on my own. Someone taught me this. But if you connect being an entrepreneur, one of the biggest traits that entrepreneurs have is that they're curious. And I think that fostering a level of curiosity within your teams is, I think, very challenging. in the finance, accounting, legal kind of, because we're more classically trained, even in engineering, quite frankly. We are much more quantitative and classically trained. It's not almost encouraged to be an ideation type person or but I do think curiosity leads to asking questions about how you can do things differently, how you can actually change, how you can transform. And I'm a naturally curious person, but I think you can actually foster that within your teams, right? You can actually incent people. You can create safe spaces where people can talk about crazy ideas or just share information from an awareness and enablement standpoint about what different groups do. And I think even as simple as to having your facilities person explain to other groups how they think about office layouts and some of the challenges that they need around that they have around trying to think about how many people are going to be hired and what types of people and the frequency of coming in the office, and people don't understand that. They just kind of assume you just go get us some more space. So there are things that you can really encourage that. I believe if people are curious, they will start to see how other people do it outside in view, and encourage people to understand, what are your competitors doing? What's the market doing? And think about whether you do it better or worse than the market. And if you don't do it better, then that means you do it worse. And so you should probably try to think about how you can change. So I think that curiosity thing is something that you can teach, you can encourage, you can foster, even with the people that are the least likely to want to take those risks. They'll learn that that's kind of part of their development.
So, Bona, do you want to add, something, from your experience to this?
Yeah, I mean, look, curiosity is a great theme. It happens to be one of our core values, and being a science-based biotech, curiosity, entrepreneur, scientists, the folks are very, very curious. Can this protein work? And we really try to encourage, ask them questions. And we do a lot of, like Ken alluded to, facilities is a good example. We do science talks where a scientist who will explain one of their projects to the entire company, many of whom are not scientists. So I'll be there right front and center asking really, really stupid questions about how an antibody works. But usually, like I teach my kids, if you're thinking it, usually half your class is thinking it too. So just have the brave, the courage to ask the question, and a good discussion will ensue. So I totally agree. I think that's an important part of being an enterprise leader, is the courage to ask the questions and get a good conversation started.
But also, I think empowerment is important too. Empowering people, again, at all levels, to ask those questions and being comfortable in asking what may be perceived as a stupid question. But really, I mean, for us, we've got at any given point 20 or 30 people who are not US, they're based in Japan. So part of our culture is teaching. So teaching people how we do things here so they can take that to Cosmo worldwide. And so it's a very healthy culture of encouraging questions and encouraging people to think, how can, asking those questions, how can we do things better? And using the curiosity aspect of that and bringing that forward. So, yeah.
No, that's amazing. I mean, I'd like to sort of share an anecdote here. I mean, apart from the last 4 years that I've been an entrepreneur, I used to always be scared to talk to CFOs. Right? Again, I used to always find the CFO role to be extremely intimidating. Right? How do you have you come across this? As someone highlighted this aspect. How do you spoke about cultural challenges, right? How do you deal with this aspect where employees, team members or other functions are not really too confident, or they feel intimidated to sort of, ask questions to the CFO?
For me, I think it gets back to relationships, building those relationships. I'm the first non-Japanese CFO in this group, and I was hired at the board level and dropped in, and it was a big culture shock on both sides. But because they weren't used to someone that likes to go talk to people, likes to go out to the job sites, or likes to talk to folks at all different levels. And so I think again, developing relationships can go a long way for the benefit of the company and for the benefit of us as individuals.
Gosh, I think
Yeah.
the other thing is approachability, right? And I think that sometimes we forget that that it can be intimidating, that people are intimidated by the power of the role that we hold. And I think that, you know, building those relationships, getting in front of people, spending time with teams, you know, getting on sales calls, communicating and over communicating, not assuming that people understand why we're doing something or why a change is happening, and spending time in those smaller groups where people are more likely to ask questions than in all hands, for example, or and you know, can't really walk the floor anymore right now, right? Because no one's in the office, but finding those times to connect with people. And I think that breaks down or has us be less intimidating and more approachable, and starts to, you know, and having a level of humility and being humble, and it all, you know, comes into play in finding ways that we can teach with simplicity on some of the things so that people have a better understanding of it. So it takes effort. It takes effort on our part for sure to do that.
It was interesting. My onboarding was even more complicated in this regard because I had been on the board of Scholar Rock for 2 years. And as part of a broader kind of management transition, and my own day job opened up, and it was good timing, and I had a good meeting of the minds with the incoming CEO. The CFO slot was open, so I jumped in, and there was even more, like, not just CFO, but used to be a board member. What can we say? Is he still on the board? Is he, you know, I was on the comp committee. Like, it was just, so I had to really disarm a lot of that. Like, look, I'm just here because I think I can add some value and learn a lot. And let me focus on how I want to learn a lot. And let me ask, and we spent a lot of time, the new CEO and I together spent a lot of time in small groups, obviously teams, which was unfortunate, but rather than in person, but better than nothing. And we spent a lot of time in small kind of coffee talks. And, you know, that's where you show up and show them your full self as a person, get to know them as a person, and you get some casual discussions going, and those walls and titles start to kind of break down a little bit. And everyone's in here. Again, we kind of come back to patient service, and we're all here to serve patients. It's a common theme. It's a common mission that's kind of bigger than all of us. So that tends to kind of break down those walls.
So I've I've learned employees, team members that work at your company, and even that don't work at your company but may have a vested interest in your company, they're spending 25 to 50% of their waking hours involved in your business, right? That, you know, through one way or another. And they care a lot about what's going on in the business. Their salaries are tied to it, their careers are tied to it. And like I said, they're spending 25 to 50% of their waking time involved in the business. So what we can do as CFOs is to help explain to them what's going on in the business, to help talk to them. Don't make it, when you talk to the CFO, it's an interrogation around a topic. Go outbound to the company and actually talk about what's happening. Offer to talk to the different functional leaders in their all hands, not in a judgmental way, in a way where, let me help explain to you what happened in the last quarter. Let me talk to you about what you guys are doing and how you can connect some of your initiatives to help the company. Really helping connect the dots. That's when people feel engaged, right? That's actually when they feel connected to the company. And it's not hard to do. And quite frankly, it's more fun to do that than many of our other tasks that we do in the course of the day. So I think that if we can get in that rhythm of actually being almost an advocate for the employees and their communication and their knowledge, you can do that at the functional level, because all of your peers and all of the managers will welcome you in if you're coming in to help give the employees information that they otherwise don't have, or answer questions. And I've done that at Pega more than I have at other companies. And I would tell you that I do it now, 2-3x versus what I did in the first year, because of the outpouring of support from employees and appreciation about how much they yearn that. So I think that's another aspect of the CFO, that you should just condition yourself to be outbound and communicating and helping people understand the story and the results.
Love it. Love the inputs, on this. As we move ahead, one topic that I'd love to, engage on is no transformation is complete, if we don't talk about technology or the role of, role technology plays in leading to that, transformation, right? And especially in a situation where there's a choice between, extending life of, let's say, technology and extending ROI of systems that have been already invested. What are some of the bets that, CFOs, and, particularly in your, sort of earlier roles have taken with respect to technology? And I'll follow it up with a bunch of questions that we've had from the audience.
I can jump in on that. So, I think understanding where your business is going is certainly can help in how you think about technology. And, for us at Salsify, we, even when we were, 10 million in ARR, when I joined the company, right, we knew that the market opportunity that we had in front of us and our position in the market, we could grow a significant company here. And so investing early in systems to help drive that growth instead of hinder it, and to help drive that transformation in the business, I think is important. And sometimes, especially in our own, as CFOs, sometimes we can think about our own teams and technology within our own teams last, making sure that other parts of the business are getting what they need. And I can't stress enough that getting ahead of that and making those decisions on technology that can help drive your teams forward, whether it's through data and analysis, or systems linking other systems. Where are we going to be in 3 years if we make this purchase today? Those types of things, I think is really critical. So using it as an enabler of that operational efficiency and driving growth.
Ken, Ted, Bonner, anything else that you'd want to add on, the role that you've seen technology play in accelerating some of these, changes and transformation?
Yeah, I mentioned a minute ago, but so we sort of waited a little bit too late. So I wish we were sort of, as Mary described, on the front end. We've got great infrastructure, technology wise here. There's some enhancements that we brought in and are bringing in now. We're in the middle of a conversion right now, and it's going really well, and it's really exciting. I mean, so finally, things are happening, and no reason. I'm not going to go into any reasons why I was delayed, but it's a big deal, and it should have been done probably last year. We're only a year behind, which is maybe not so bad, but we will see lots of efficiencies, and it's a major change for within our ERP system. So I think in spite of whatever else is going on, there's always going to be something. There's always going to be some reason why you shouldn't bring in the new technologies, as long as it's, as long as the technology is proven itself. But yeah, I agree. We pull the trigger regardless of what else is going on. Even if we are in the middle of a pandemic, there are still ways to get it done, and that's important.
Right.
I guess I just add, it's always a balance, especially, with any company, a highly evolving, fluid company. My last company grew a lot by acquisition. And so we'd acquire and bolt things on, and it got very complicated very quickly. So the technology always felt a little bit behind. We'd have to rush to catch up. Scholar Rock is growing organically as the assets and the programs, the clinical programs advance. I mentioned we've got our sights set on graduating from phase 2 to phase 3. That really ups the game a lot. We should not be implementing a Pfizer-like system because we're not quite there yet, but we certainly don't want to get caught behind the power curve very quickly when you're in phase 3. The demands on the supply chain and manufacturing, quality tracking become very high. So that requires a lot of system investment. So in many cases, I think in smaller companies, IT, the CIO report into the CFO. That's the case at Scholar Rock and was the case at my last couple of companies. So kind of tied at the hip on that. And I think that's an example of really managing someone who has a much deeper expertise than you do, sort of outside the traditional CFO accounting finance channel, but really tied at the hip with the strategy of the business to enable the business.
I just one last thing to add to these are all, great thoughts. I think you need to make sure that you don't overdo your technology or create a timeline where value is so far out that your business changes even in the middle of the deployment of it. So I do think thinking about, there are lots of agile ways to develop technology and actually to do kind of minimum level product kind of releases that actually help solve significant problems. So I do think where you can, many times you can leverage some of your existing technology and just do slight little improvements or connective tissue or be able to put things over top that actually may get you 5-10 years down the road till your business may evolve in the next way. So I just think I would just caution people to to be careful that you don't over-engineer the technology, because your business changes so fast that it may actually your technology may have been built for what you were when you started, but you may be different when you end. And so that's just one thing I would caution CFOs to think about.
Right. Great. On that note, I think, I've been told that we have, very little time left. And, at this point in time, there are a couple of questions from the audience that I'd like to, sort of share. One question from Gina Riley is, it's actually for Mary. You spoke of the need to take risks. What counsel would you give to others on developing that ability?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for many CFOs are sort of wired to think about risk first, and I think it's really training on that opportunity. And I do think immersing yourself in the business and understanding beyond your own functional area helps with that risk taking, because you can see opportunity beyond just the risk. So I think we have one of our values here is fast but not flawless, and I think you have to be able to allow people to fail, but fail fast. And so it's both developing that skill around thinking about opportunity as well as risk, and then knowing that some things are going to fail, and that's okay, as long as you're failing fast and then pivoting and moving on in another direction.
Yeah, ring fence the risk, right? I try to delegate a lot and let people trip a bit and develop and learn from that and support them during that. Look, you want to understand it is a trip at a level, is this project, if it hiccups a little bit or misses by 10 or 15%, is that going to put the business at risk? No, it's going to be a pretty well-contained risk, but good teaching moment. So on balance, it's a win for the business. You've developed someone and you've probably taken a big step forward. So I think it's sort of definitely take risks, definitely make decisions, and be comfortable that your best business judgment may turn out not to be the best business judgment, but be introspective, learn from it, own it, and then move on.
I think I have time for one more question, and this is coming from John Brisboy. What about your enterprise risk management? Did you have a crisis management plan when COVID hit? And this is open to all the panelists. I think this is about the last question that we can take today.
So I will quote humorously a very good boxer named Mike Tyson, who said, everybody's got a plan till you get punched in the mouth, right? So I think that's what COVID did to us, right? Like, we all have these plans, we all have these risk management. Who would have thought that a version of a virus or some stronger strand of the flu, whatever you want to call it, is actually going to be the thing that takes down the entire world, travel, or, so I don't think we saw this coming. I think we thought, cyber terrorism, something other, but we didn't expect this to be the thing that we were dealing with in 2020. So I think our cyber risk and just in general enterprise risk management is really focused on the agility of responding, right? The ability to get people together, to get on bridge calls, to get the right people in the room, to do the root cause, to figure out how you have certain controls and protections against certain types of risk. But the reality is, you can't protect from everything every minute of every day. Risk is there. And I think that you've got to just build a system of responding. I think that's the key. It's what you do when you actually get hit with it and how agile you are. To me, that's the most important part.
I think that's extremely well put. Ted, you are adding something to that. Sorry if I cut you
No,
off.
look, I love that quote. I've used it a couple times in my career and over the course of things. It summarizes 2020 pretty well. I mean, look, one of my favorite authors is Nassim Taleb, the guy who wrote The Black Swan. And look, I was on the board of this company when COVID hit, and I emailed the CEO and the chairman and said, look, this could be a black swan. What's our cash preservation plan? Because in my estimation, in March, I assumed the capital markets were going to shut down. So I wanted to understand how this company is going to survive for 2 years if the capital markets were shut down. Now, look, amazingly, IPOs are happening. It's the biggest year ever in biopharma, follow-ons. It's really remarkable. I wouldn't have seen that. I just, that worked out much better than I would have expected, but very quickly get to that, look, black swans happen. This is, you got to think through this and build some redundancies in your systems, and a little excess cash is not excess cash. It's really, really important. So
So it looks like we need to
Absolutely.
shut things down here.
Yeah.
Lots of
So
messages.
again, I think, extra cash is not so extra cash is a great way to sort of wrap up, a session consisting of, CFOs. So thank you very much, for taking the time. I've loved every minute of it, enjoyed, learned a lot. And, hopefully our audience, got a great, great piece of takeaways as well. So yeah, thank you so much, for taking the time. And I'm handing it over to the CFO LC team.
thank you, Yash. Great
Thanks,
job.
Josh.
Thanks all. Nice to see you.
Thanks.